Another no-look pass. Net barely moves. The arena exhales. Before she ever logged a single minute in the WNBA, before sold-out crowds and primetime broadcasts became routine, Caitlin Clark had already won a different kind of battle. The business one. While she was still in college, still wearing Iowa black and gold, America's biggest brands lined up for her attention. Nike, State Farm, Wilson, Gatorade. Not because they had to, but because they could not afford not to. So how did it happen? What did Clark see that the rest of the sports world missed? She didn't wait for trophies or a professional resume to validate her value. She built it early. She turned authenticity into currency and moments into movements. This isn't just a story about endorsements or commercials. It's the blueprint for how one athlete reshaped modern sports marketing and forced corporate America to play catch-up. This is how a kid from Iowa.to understand why Caitlin Clark became the most valuable marketing asset in women's basketball. Before playing a single professional game, you have to strip away the hype and start at the beginning. Not with box scores. Not with record books. With identity. Because long before corporations called, long before endorsement contracts and national campaigns, Caitlin Clark was building something far more powerful than a jump shot. She was building belief. She grew up in Iowa, far from media hubs and endorsement pipelines, in a place where attention is earned, not assumed. There were no shortcuts available. No fast tracks to stardom. If you wanted to be seen, you had to be undeniable. From the moment she touched a basketball, Clark played with an edge that didn't look rehearsed or coached. It looked personal. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to prove something to herself. That internal motivation mattered more than anyone realized at the time. As a young player, she didn't fit the traditional mold. She shot from distances that made coaches uncomfortable. She played with an audacity that felt disruptive. But that audacity was never reckless. It was calculated. She trusted her preparation. She trusted her feel for the game. And most importantly, she trusted her own voice. That confidence carried over into how she spoke about basketball, how she spoke about herself, and how she spoke about her dreams. She never minimized them. She never softened them to make other people comfortable. She talked openly about wanting to be great, about wanting to change the game, about wanting to inspire kids who looked like her and grew up where she did. That honesty became her signature when Clark talked about missing prom, missing parties, missing parts of a normal teenage life. It didn't sound like sacrifice for attention. It sounded like choice. She wasn't losing anything. She was trading it for something she wanted more. That framing matters. Brands don't just sell products. They sell values. Discipline. Ambition. Focus. Purpose. Caitlin Clark embodied those values naturally, without polish or scripting. She wasn't performing relatability. She was living it. That distinction is rare, and it's why people connected to her long before they knew her stats. She also benefited from something that can't be manufactured: continuity. Her story made sense from start to finish. There were no sudden reinventions, no drastic image pivots. The kid launching deep threes and empty gyms became the college star doing the same thing on national television. The through line was authenticity. Viewers didn't feel like they were watching a character evolve. They felt like they were watching a person become more visible. That consistency built trust, and trust is the most valuable currency in modern marketing. By the time brands started paying attention, Clark wasn't just an athlete with momentum. She was a narrative people already believed in. She represented possibility without sounding preachy. Confidence without arrogance. Ambition without apology. She spoke about women's basketball not as something that needed saving, but as something that deserved investment. That framing flipped the conversation. She wasn't asking for opportunity. She was demonstrating value. And value attracts capital. What many companies missed early was that Clark's appeal wasn't limited to basketball fans. Her story resonated with parents, with young professionals, with people who had never watched a women's basketball game but recognized drive when they saw it. She made excellence feel accessible. Not easy. Accessible. Work for it and it's possible. That message cut across demographics in a way most athletes never achieve. She wasn't niche. She was universal. This is where the foundation was laid. Not in endorsement meetings. Not in boardrooms. In gyms, interviews, and everyday moments where she showed the same person on camera and off. When brands eventually came calling, they weren't discovering her. They were validating what audiences already felt. That's the difference between a sponsored athlete and a market-shaping one. Caitlin Clark didn't wait to be chosen. She built something worth choosing. The first major corporation to truly understand what Caitlin Clark represented didn't come from the sneaker world or the apparel industry. It came from insurance. State Farm saw something others hesitated to act on. They didn't see an unproven college athlete. They saw a moment. The NIL era was new, unstable, and filled with uncertainty. Most companies approached it cautiously, dipping their toes in with small deals and limited exposure. State Farm stepped forward with conviction. They didn't just sign Clark. They put her front and center in a national campaign. That decision carried real risk. If public perception shifted, if performance dipped, if interest faded, the backlash would be immediate. But State Farm understood something crucial. Caitlin Clark didn't feel temporary. She felt inevitable. The brilliance of that partnership wasn't just the contract. It was the execution. Clark didn't feel inserted into a commercial. She felt like she belonged there. Her delivery was effortless. Her humor was dry. Her reactions felt unscripted because they essentially were. She didn't perform for the camera. She existed in front of it. That subtle difference made audiences lean in instead of tune out. The commercials didn't feel like ads. They felt like moments. And moments travel. Once those moments hit social media, the response was immediate. Fans recreated lines. Kids mimicked shots. Edits flooded timelines. State Farm hadn't just bought airtime. They had ignited participation. That's the holy grail of modern marketing. When audiences stop watching and start engaging, the product becomes secondary to the experience. At that point, the athlete isn't endorsing the brand. The brand is borrowing credibility from the athlete. Nike watched all of this unfold. And when they made their move, it was seismic. After 27 years away from the Super Bowl, Nike chose Caitlin Clark as the face of its return. That decision defied every traditional marketing rule. She hadn't played professionally. She hadn't won a pro championship. She didn't have decades of brand equity behind her. What she had was momentum. Cultural gravity. Relevance that couldn't be manufactured. Nike didn't need safety. They needed attention. And Clark commanded it. The Super Bowl commercial itself was restrained, emotional, and human. No spectacle. No overload. Just story. Nike trusted the audience to feel instead of being told what to feel. Clark spoke about sacrifice, about belief, about choosing the hard path. The message wasn't subtle, but it was sincere. And sincerity cuts through noise better than any special effect ever could. Nike didn't create an image. They amplified one that already existed. Then came Gatorade. Instead of slapping Clark's face on a bottle, they invited her into the process. They built a product around her routines, her recovery, her preparation. That decision signaled a shift from endorsement to collaboration. Fans noticed immediately. The product sold out in days. Not because of scarcity tactics, but because it felt real. People wanted access to something connected to her process, not just her name. That's the power of credibility. Wilson took it even further. They didn't treat Clark as a spokesperson. They treated her as a co-creator. Giving a young female athlete creative control over product design was unprecedented. It wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Wilson acknowledged her basketball intelligence, not just her popularity. The accompanying campaign was quiet, reflective, and intimate. It sold feeling, not features. It positioned Clark as a steward of the game, not a billboard. By this point, the pattern was undeniable. Brands that succeeded with Caitlin Clark didn't try to mold her. They let her lead. They didn't overproduce. They trusted her presence. They understood that her authenticity wasn't something to manage. It was the asset itself. And once that realization spread, the market shifted permanently. What separates Caitlin Clark from every athlete before her in the endorsement space isn't just success. It's scale. She didn't break one record. She reset the system. She became the first college athlete to headline a national State Farm campaign. The first woman to lead Nike's return to the Super Bowl. The first female player to co-design a Wilson signature collection. The first Gatorade athlete with a recovery-focused product built specifically around her training methods. Each achievement alone would define a career. Together, they define a shift in how athlete value is measured. At the core of her dominance are three traits brands chase and almost never find in one person. The first is natural camera presence. Clark doesn't perform. She reacts. She understands timing instinctively. She knows when to pause, when to let silence speak, when to allow a moment to breathe. That can't be coached. It's felt. Cameras respond to it, and audiences do too. The second is emotional narrative. Her story isn't unique because of circumstance. It's powerful because of honesty. She talks about sacrifice without dramatizing it. She talks about ambition without shrinking it. Anyone who has chased a dream recognizes themselves in her journey. That universality turns viewers into participants. It makes people care. The third is cultural movement. Clark doesn't just create content. She creates imitation. Fans don't just watch. They recreate. They share. They remix. That organic spread is marketing department's most elusive goal, and Clark generates it without effort. She doesn't push trends. She becomes them. The ripple effects are already visible. Women's basketball viewership has surged. Sponsorship values have risen. Brands that once hesitated now compete. And future athletes benefit from a path that didn't exist before. Clark didn't ask the industry to change. She forced it to keep up. Now the question isn't whether she can sell products. It's how far her influence extends. Technology, finance, media, lifestyle, entertainment. She isn't confined to sports marketing because her appeal isn't confined to sport. She represents ambition in its purest form. And ambition is universal. The companies watching now understand what early adopters understood then. Caitlin Clark isn't a campaign. She's a platform. Whoever aligns with her next won't just gain visibility. They'll gain relevance. Because she isn't following the future of marketing. She's shaping it. Before she ever played a single minute in the WNBA, before sellout crowds and national broadcasts became the norm, Caitlin Clark had already changed the game. Not on the court, but in the marketplace. Still in college, still representing Iowa, the most powerful brands in America were lining up to attach their names to hers. Nike, State Farm, Wilson, Gatorade. How did she rewrite the rules of sports marketing before earning a professional resume? What did she understand about authenticity, influence, and cultural momentum that the rest of the industry overlooked? She didn't wait for titles or trophies to validate her value. She created it early. She turned belief into leverage and visibility into impact. This is the story of how one athlete from Iowa forced corporate America to rethink how it values women's sports, and why every major brand is now racing to follow the path she carved.